There's a certain kind of silence in the woods after sunset, thick, heavy, like the trees themselves are holding their breath. That was the backdrop the night I decided to set up camp later than I should have. I'd lingered too long on the trail, chasing the last light, and by the time I picked a clearing, the sky had swallowed every hint of blue. No moon, no stars, just blackness so complete I couldn't tell where the tree line ended and the sky began. My pack thudded to the ground and I thought, no problem, I've done this 100 times. But there's a difference between pitching a tent in daylight and wrestling one into existence when your world is no bigger than the weak glow of a half-dead lantern. The ground was uneven, roots and rocks jutting up like bones. I shuffled around, trying to find a patch flat enough to stretch out on later. Every step felt like stepping into a trap, and sure enough, I caught my boot on a root and went sprawling forward. My pack, of course, was still strapped on, so I hit the dirt like a turtle flipping on its back. Lying there, I laughed at myself, quietly though, because even laughter sounds too loud when you're alone in the woods at night. Finally, I found what felt like the least terrible spot and dragged the tent out. That's when the real battle began. Tent poles, in the dark, become serpents. They slip away, twist in the wrong direction, jab you in the shins. I'd get one corner staked, and by the time I moved to the other, the first would collapse like it was mocking me. The fabric kept folding in on itself, a shapeless heap that refused to resemble anything remotely like shelter. My breath was fogging in the cold, and every rustle in the brush around me made me whip my head up, half expecting glowing eyes to be staring back. And still, there I was, cursing under my breath at aluminum poles and stubborn canvas, feeling like I was locked in some eternal struggle, man versus tent, darkness the referee. The thing about setting up camp in the dark is that your ears start working harder than your eyes. Every crack of a branch, every shuffle of leaves, it all sounds closer, heavier, more deliberate. As I fumbled with the poles, I kept glancing toward the tree line, half expecting something to emerge. It was like wrestling a giant, unyielding blanket. Every movement made the nylon screech. By the time I crawled free, my heart was hammering harder than it had on the trail earlier. I tried again, slower this time, my fingers numbing in the night air. The lantern sputtered, barely giving enough light to see the pole's sockets. I thought about giving up, just rolling into my sleeping bag and letting the sky be my roof. But the thought of dew soaking me through by morning kept me going. Besides, stubbornness runs deep when you're tired. I wanted to win this fight, no matter how long it took. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted, a low, drawn-out sound that echoed like a warning. My breath fogged in the thin beam of light, and I realized how alone I was, standing knee-deep in leaves, fighting a pile of nylon while the forest shifted and whispered around me. Each gust of wind made the fabric flap and snap like it was alive. I caught myself talking to it out loud. "You're not beating me tonight." Little did I know, the night wasn't done testing me yet. By the third attempt, I was starting to feel like a sideshow act. Me and this stubborn tent locked in a slapstick routine for an audience of trees. I'd brace one side, stake it down, then hustle to the other only to watch the first side come loose and fold over again. At one point, I even tried holding the ridgepole in my teeth while I worked the fabric around it, which only ended with me gagging on cold aluminum and spitting dirt. If anyone had been watching, they'd have thought I'd lost my mind. The lantern finally gave out with a sad little hiss, plunging me into true darkness. I fumbled for my backup, a tiny flashlight I kept in my pocket. The beam was barely stronger than a firefly's glow, and to keep both hands free, I clamped it between my teeth. That was when the comedy turned into chaos. My breath fogged the light so badly I couldn't see, and when I shifted it to one side, the beam swung around wildly, throwing dizzy shadows across the clearing. A root caught my boot, and down I went, flashlight flying. For a heart-stopping second, I thought I'd lost it for good, but it landed lens up, casting a weak little spotlight that made me less like a fool and a little more like a determined camper who might just win this battle after all. But just when I thought victory was within reach, the night decided to throw in one last twist. I had just wrestled the last pole into its socket when the wind arrived, sudden and sharp, like someone opening a door to another world. The treetops began to hiss, leaves rattling against one another, and before I could drive in the final stake, a gust caught the half-secured tent and turned it into a giant sail. The whole structure lurched sideways, dragging me with it as if the forest itself had decided to test my resolve. I threw myself onto the fabric, sprawling belly first across the half-built shelter, clutching at flapping corners like I was trying to ride a wild horse. Every gust puffed the nylon upward, snapping and straining against my weight. My hands stung from gripping the cords, and my knees sank into cold leaf litter. Somewhere overhead, a branch cracked, the sound sharp enough to make me duck instinctively, though I didn't dare let go. The ridiculousness of it all wasn't lost on me. There I was, grown man flattened across a tent in the dark, muttering like a lunatic. "Not tonight. You're staying right here." My breath came out ragged, steaming in the air. I must have looked like some desperate prospector guarding a claim. Every flap of nylon was a reminder that I was one wrong move from starting over again, back at square one. The flashlight beam, now lying on the ground where it had landed earlier, spun lazily as the wind rattled it. Each sweep of light caught glimpses of the woods beyond, dark trunks, swaying branches, eyeshine here and there that may have been deer or raccoons, but in that moment felt like a crowd of silent spectators. I could almost hear them chuckling at the show. At last, I managed to pin the tent long enough to drive in the last stake, hammering with a rock until my hand throbbed. The fabric pulled taut, no longer a wild kite, but a passable shelter. The wind still tested it, tugging here and there, but it held. I slumped back on my heels, dirt smudged across my hands and knees, chest heaving with relief. I'd won, or at least survived the struggle, each beat loud in my ears. That's when I heard it, a soft crunch in the leaf litter outside. Slow, deliberate. Then another. I froze, holding my breath, my hand resting on the thin wall of fabric as though that would give me some sense of what was out there. The sound stopped. A beat later, something brushed against the tent wall. Light, almost curious. My chest tightened, mind racing through possibilities. Deer, raccoon, maybe even a black bear nosing around for scraps. I stayed still, waiting. The silence stretched on until finally the unseen visitor moved off, footsteps fading into the night. I let out a shaky laugh, more relief than humor. "All right," I whispered to the empty air. "You win. This is your forest. I'm just borrowing a corner of it." Somehow saying it made the place feel less hostile, more like I was a guest instead of an intruder. Eventually, exhaustion took over. The nylon snapped softly in the lingering breeze, and the earthy smell of crushed leaves seeped through the thin floor beneath me. My eyelids grew heavy, and at last I drifted off, sore, dirty, but strangely content. The tent wasn't pretty, but it stood, and in the woods, sometimes that's victory enough. In the morning, sunlight poured through the canopy, warming the fabric until it glowed. From outside, I could see how crooked and lopsided my handiwork had turned out, stakes uneven, poles bent at angles that would make a scoutmaster weep. But standing there, sipping the first bitter mouthful of camp coffee, I felt nothing but pride. I'd fought the dark, the wind, and my own clumsiness, and I'd come out the other side with shelter and a story. And that, I think, is the lesson the forest gave me that night. It's not about perfection, it's about persistence. Out there, the struggle is eternal, but so is the reward of knowing you made it through.